This is the Tata Curvv and it's here to take on a whole field of mid-sized SUVs. Except it's not quite a conventional mid-sized SUV itself, and that's because Yep, along with the Citroën Basalt, the Tata Curvv brings the SUV coupe form factor to the mass segment. Petrol and diesel versions of the Curvv go on sale in September. What we have here is the Curvv EV that's just been launched. I'll get to prices, powertrains and platform in a bit, but before all else, I have to talk looks. Let's start at the back. The coupe-like roofline and this high-deck tail are the defining design details on the Tata Curvv and make it really stand out from the crowd. But as distinctive as the Curvv is in look, it's also very polarizing. I for one think Tata Motors has been really bold with the design, and I actually think that this is a really well turned out car. But I also know that there will be a lot of people who won't warm up to its design. Then again, buyers found the Nexon too rad when it came out in 2017. Today, it's a bestseller. Styling at the back is very edgy. You get this full width LED light bar and it looks really cool. It's got a nice and angular tailgate, a lot of gloss materials lower down, and you also get a scuff plate like element lower down. The contrast roof, split roof spoiler and the shark fin antenna also add flavor to the styling. It's in profile that you get the full effect of the Curvv's distinct design, where coupe-like upper half tops off an SUV typical lower half with exaggerated wheel arches and all. Speaking of which, the wheel arches are finished in gloss plastics. Now, I don't know if that's the best approach because this is a material that's very prone to scratching. So we'll have to see how it stands the test of time. Also, to my eyes, the oversized wheel arch cladding makes the Curvv look smaller than it actually is. For perspective, the Curvv's 4310mm length, 1810mm width and 1637mm height means it's actually about the same size as a Hyundai Creta. However, the Curvv's 2560mm wheelbase is the smallest in the segment. Now this bit ahead of the B-pillar is actually quite conventional mid-sized SUV, but the Curvv does look really strong and muscular. Helping that impression are these large 18-inch wheels. They've got an aero design and look quite attractive. You also get 190mm of ground clearance, which really helps the stance. Also adding muscle to the look is this very chunky bonnet. Up front, it's actually very easy to confuse a Curvv EV for a Nexon EV. In fact, your only real point of difference is the presence of this charging bay right at the center. A cool thing is that it's got an electronic opening and closing mechanism, which is a really nice touch. Apart from that, you get full width LED DRLs with a nice LED light signature. You get projector LED headlamps lower down, fog lamps below that, and streaks on the lower section of the bumper. In a first on a Tata EV, the bonnet opens to reveal some storage space. The 11.6-litre bay is probably best used to store the charging wires. Of course, the larger storage area is at the back, access to which is via a segment-first gesture-controlled tailgate. And while you'd expect the Curvv's shape to come with compromises in luggage room, capacity is a segment-best 500 litres. It'll accommodate large suitcases with ease, and there's also the option to fold the 60-40 split seats to make more room should the need arise. A spare tyre sits in a dedicated compartment under the boot floor. What do you think of the way the Curvv looks? Let us know in the comment section below, and if you haven't already, please do subscribe to the Autocar India channel and hit that bell icon to be notified every time we have a new video up. A new key fob is a detail of interest in its own right, while the aero-enhancing flush-sitting door handles are a nice first touchpoint. The handles get lights, which is a big help on a dark night. On to the inside story. If you've spent any time in a Tata Nexon EV, you'll find yourself in a very familiar setting in the Tata Curvv EV as well, and that's because the two models share their dashboard. However, the Curvv does use different colors and textures, such as this panel on the dashboard, to very good effect. But is that Nexon link a bad thing? Absolutely not, because with its 12.3-inch touchscreen, 10.25-inch digital dials, a steering wheel that illuminates as you switch the car on, buttons that appear on this gloss black panel, ambient lighting and a panoramic sunroof, The Curvv EV ticks all the boxes on a checklist of hot and trending features. Before I get into the individual elements, first a word on quality. Now, Tata Motors has made big improvements in this area over the past few years, and you see that in the Curvv as well. I really like the textured plastics on the dashboard top, but you don't get any soft touch materials in here. On the whole, I'd say quality is satisfactory, but a notch down on the best in the segment. Over to the screens. The 12.3-inch touchscreen packs in a whole lot of features. In fact, you'll be quite surprised by all the options that you have. You can stream video content when the car is parked. You get your usual selection of Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with wireless connectivity. And pardon the plug, but you should use the Spotify app on the system to listen to Autocar India's Deep Drive podcast. They will liven up your journeys. The screen is also the display for the onboard air purifier, 360-degree cameras, blind view monitor, and sound modes that help fine-tune the output from the sweet-sounding 4-speaker, 4-tweeter, and subwoofer JBL system. As for the 10.25-inch digital dials, they're really deep set into the instrument console, and as a result, they look smaller than they actually are. The screen and the layouts are configurable, and it is very nicely laid out, I have to say that. Also nice is the option to have the blind spot monitor display on the dials. The screen can also project Google Maps off your Android phone, but won't show Google Maps from an iPhone. Now, as for the driving position, I like the fact that you can see the bonnet edges from the driver's seat, but what would have helped comfort here is steering reach adjust. Also, that sloping roofline does come with a compromise in terms of rear visibility. What compounds matters on a rainy day is the absence of a rear windscreen wiper. Now, as for the front seats themselves, they're nicely cushioned, but for a larger framed individual like myself, shoulder support is in short supply. I do like the fact that the driver's seats get powered adjust, the front seats are ventilated, and what's really nice is that even the front passenger gets seat height adjust. Where the Curvv could have been better thought out is in terms of storage spaces. Sure, you do get a storage bay under the center armrest. There is a wireless charging pad in easy reach, but there are no cup holders on the center console, which is a strange omission. Your only option is to use the cup holders in the glove box, and that's not an ideal solution. The glove box is large and gets these handy compartments, but I would have liked to see larger and more accommodating door pockets, though you can fit in a 1-liter bottle here. What is an irritant is access to the USB slots and the 12-volt charging socket here. It is quite an awkward position. The Curvv EV gets a 45-watt USB charger which can power a laptop. Other features on top versions of the Curvv include eSIM-based connected tech, so you can remotely keep an eye on your car. There's an auto-dimming mirror, an electric parking brake with auto hold, auto headlights, and rain-sensing wipers. Over to the rear seat. First point of note is that access to the back requires a big step up. So getting into a Curvv isn't the most convenient of exercises, and once you're inside, you'll realize that this is a cabin that's not really abundant on space. Now, I'm just under 6 feet tall. The front seat is set to my driving position, and though I have a couple of inches to the front seat, it is nowhere near class best standards. The bigger issue for someone of my height is headroom. My hair is brushing the headliner, and you'll also notice this very pronounced hump in the roof. I guess it's there to accommodate the mechanism for the panoramic sunroof. Now, there is a go around of this. The Curvv seat gets a 2-step recline, and reclining it solves the issue to some extent, but you're still all too aware that the roof is really close to your head. On the flip side, shorter people will find that the window line is a bit high up, so it doesn't really help that feeling of space at the back. Even in terms of cabin width, it's not the biggest in the segment. 3 large adults will be a tight squeeze at the back. Perhaps the middle seat is best occupied by a child. The good thing is that the middle passenger also gets a 3-point seat belt. So the seat itself, it's nicely cushioned and comfortable, but the seating position isn't. As is quite evident, I am sat in a knees up seating position, and that's because the big battery pack is under the floor, and this is a complaint that we've had on a whole bunch of EVs. Now, as for features at the back, the outboard seats get adjustable headrests. You get a flip down center armrest with 2 cup holders. There are air conditioning vents at the back, and you also get a 45-watt USB charging socket. The Curvv EV is the second model after the Punch EV to be built on Tata's latest active EV architecture. The Nexon EV, for reference, uses the older Ziptron architecture. Tata says the new architecture is more space efficient, can accommodate larger batteries, and supports future-ready tech. The Curvv EV is available with 2 battery options, each with a different output for the permanent magnet synchronous motor mounted up front that drives the front wheels. A 45 kWh battery pack with a 150 horsepower 215 Nm motor is the base powertrain, while higher spec models use a 55 kWh battery pack with a 167 horsepower and 215 Nm motor. LFP is the chemistry of choice for the batteries, but the 55 kWh uses more energy-dense prismatic cells, a change from the Tata norm of using cylindrical cells. It's the Curvv EV55 featured here. So in this top spec avatar, the Curvv EV makes 167 horsepower. Now, to put things in perspective, the most powerful of the turbo petrol mid-sized SUVs make about 160 horsepower. The advantage here is that all that power is delivered instantly. So there we go. There's no delay or lag in how that power is served up, so ask and you shall receive. And this makes overtakings particularly effortless. Yep, it's still not as emotional as gathering the same speed in a petrol or diesel car, but this level of performance will have even the most ardent of petrol heads break into a smile. Tata claims a 0 to 100 kph time of 8.6 seconds for the Curvv EV55, which is impressive for this price of car. Drive modes help fine-tune the experience. You won't be handicapped even in eco mode. Sure, power delivery is very linear and it isn't hurried, but if an easy-going style is what you typically follow, you'll be very satisfied with the performance on offer. Do note, speed is limited to 120 kph in eco mode and 160 kph in city and sport modes. Now, city mode unlocks a bit more power from the motor, but for the full effect, you want to keep this motor in sport mode. Also nicely done is the regenerative braking that uses the motor to slow the vehicle as you lift off the accelerator and feed the battery with the energy recovered in the process. You can shuffle through the modes via the paddle shifters. You can have the regen system switched completely off, or if it's on, you have 3 levels to choose from. And I really like that there is a noticeable difference between the 3 levels of regen. When we were driving down the hills, I was on level 3 regen and it did its job really well of slowing the car down. Now, one thing to bring up is that even at the strongest level of regen, the Curvv EV doesn't offer one pedal driving, which means it won't bring the car to a complete halt. It'll slow the car down to about 7 to 8 kph, beyond which you will have to press down on the brake pedal to bring it to a complete standstill. When you're at speeds under 20 kph, the Curvv EV will emit a hum to alert passers-by about the presence of the vehicle. This acoustic vehicle alert system is a safety requirement abroad and will be rolled out on other Tatas too. The experience inside is quiet and soothing throughout. What's also impressed over the day's driving is the level of refinement. Now, of course, there's not much that you hear from the powertrain, but even road noise, wind noise are pretty well contained. Ride comfort is a highlight too. As is a virtue on almost all Tata cars, ride comfort gets better the worse the road conditions get. The suspension feels really robust. The whole impression is that this car can take the worst of the pounding our roads, or the absence of them, can put it through. And that 190 millimeters of ground clearance really counts for a lot, because even on the worst of patches, the underside hasn't touched anywhere. Thankfully, we've not had to test its wading ability. It's not an off-roader, but hill descent control is part of the package. At highway speeds, you'll like how planted the Curvv EV feels. A detail of interest, 50:50 front to rear weight distribution. In the corners, it feels nice and sure-footed, and in general, handling is neat and tidy. If I have to bring something up, there is some inconsistency at the straight ahead position, but honestly, it's a non-issue. It makes for a confident mile muncher, and what will also keep you at peace is range. Sawmill, in another Curvv EV, did a 240km highway run with speeds between 80 to 100 kph and got an economy of 6.54 km per kilowatt hour. That works out to about 360 km on the highway. The real-world figure in lower-speed city driving would be closer to the 400km mark, which is in line with the 400 to 425 km that Tata says the average EV user can expect. The official range figure on the MIDC cycle is 585 km for the 55 kWh versions and 502 km for the 45 kWh versions. Tata says the 55 kWh battery can be charged at up to 70 kilowatts, enabling a 40-minute 10 to 80% charge. A 10 to 100% charge using the standard fit 7.2 kilowatt AC wall charger takes just under 8 hours. A 10 to 100% charge via a 15 amp wall socket will take about 21 hours. The Curvv EV supports V2V or vehicle to vehicle charging, allowing you to share power with compatible vehicles. And there's also V2L or vehicle to load, which means you can use the Curvv to power up appliances such as a coffee machine or maybe even a mattress pump on an outdoor camping adventure. An 8-year or 160,000 km warranty on the battery pack is reassuring. You can't talk Tata and not talk safety. There's no global NCAP or Bharat NCAP crash test rating as yet, but going by current form, Tata would be gunning for a full 5 stars as and when the Curvv EV is tested. Standard fit safety kit includes 6 airbags, ABS, ESC and disc brakes for all 4 wheels. Fully loaded versions also get camera and radar-based advanced driver assist systems, including lane keep assist, which is a first for a Tata. The Curvv EV packs in a full suite of radar and camera-based ADAS functions, and based on what I've experienced today driving around Udaipur, it does its job pretty well. Now, the functions that have been most handy today are the blind spot monitors, lane keep assist, lane departure warning. They've done their job really well. And what's nice is that Tata Motors has toned down the beeps and chimes that warn you, so you're not assaulted by warnings on our chaotic roads. Adaptive cruise control that maintains a set distance to a vehicle ahead worked well too, but we couldn't try the auto stop and go function that can bring the vehicle to a complete halt and get moving once the lead vehicle moves. We can only put functions such as auto emergency braking to the test in a controlled environment, but it's good to know the safety net is packaged in. Prices for the Curvv EV range from 17.49 lakh rupees to 21.99 lakh rupees ex-showroom. Interestingly, there's a price overlap with the Tata Nexon EV that tops off at 19.29 lakh rupees. At first glance, it's easy to merely think of the Curvv EV as a Nexon EV in fancy clothing. However, factor in all that the Curvv EV gets over a Nexon EV, be it in battery size, more features, more tech, and even more passenger and luggage space, and the added outlay will feel like money well spent. In fact, the Curvv EV's keen pricing not only makes it look great value when seen in light of its like-sized direct rival MG ZS EV, which costs a good few lakhs more at the top end, but also brings on-road pricing at par with petrol and diesel mid-sized SUVs, made possible by the lower GST on EVs. That the Curvv is an EV for ICE money is reason enough to take notice. The promise of low running and low service costs are pulls in their own right, but the Curvv EV backs these typical EV strengths with genuine content elsewhere. Performance is strong, real-world range will meet the requirements of most buyers, and it's packed with the latest tech and features. Fingers crossed, customer cars will be free from irritating tech bugs and glitches that can corrupt an otherwise fine experience. There's also the matter that an EV simply won't fit into everyone's life. But if you are sorted on home or office charging, the Curvv EV makes a very compelling case for itself as a mid-sized SUV to buy. Do try one before putting down on a petrol or diesel alternative. You're sure to be pleasantly surprised.